What's up, Commonwealth Nation? I'm Chase Chamberlin, co-founder and CEO of Commonwealth, and this is the Inside Track. We designed these sessions to get you guys on the inside track of the horses, partners, and all the important elements that will hopefully come together to make an incredible story and experience. Our mission at Commonwealth is to make ownership accessible at the highest levels. And so the decision to partner on a well-bred colt with a top conditioner and owner is super exciting. Today, it's all about Schoolyardsuperman, a big, strapping 2-year-old gray colt by top sire Practical Joke out of the Tiznow mare, Tiz Legal. This colt is already off and running in the barn of champion trainer Chad Brown and has received very high marks from Chad from the beginning, something we'll get into a little bit later. His sire Practical Joke is the most successful son of the absolute legend Into Mischief, the #1 general sire since 2019. 6 years, this guy has stood atop the sire ranks. He stands for $250,000 per breeding. And given that he's turning 21 next year, he's well into the twilight of his career. So Practical Joke is really best suited to take up the mantle when Into Mischief is gone. The colt's dam, Tiz Legal, is by the influential broodmare sire Tiznow. It's the only horse in history to win the Breeders' Cup Classic twice. And while this mare had a middling race career, she's already off to a really good start in the shed, producing Velvet Devil, a filly that definitely outran her pedigree and price. She's by Cantheros, who now stands for 10 grand and is a kind of a off-bred stallion. But this filly brought 130,000 at Keeneland in 2023. And while 130,000 might not stand out to some of y'all, you need to understand this was 4 times the average price for yearling fillies by Cantheros that year, and really maintains that today. To date, this filly has earned over $241,000 on the track and just recently strung together allowance wins at both Churchill Downs and Keeneland. Not an easy thing to do, and she earned Equibase speed figures of 100. While this cross hasn't been made many times, there's some really well-regarded examples, most notably Domestic Product, a horse that was also trained by Chad Brown, much like the sire Practical Joke, and is a horse that Chad has likened to this colt a number of times, both when he first received the colt and, as he's continued training on with him. But I want to jump right into the meat of it. We've only got a few minutes for this session because the issuer, Seth Morris, is busy at the sale. He's at the Keeneland breeding stock sale right now. And so I'm excited to welcome Seth to the call. Seth is an owner, a bloodstock agent, and a winning handicapper. Seth's a 20-year Wall Street executive with a lifelong passion for horse racing. After his career in finance, he transitioned into the industry full-time, spending more than a decade as a racing manager for Long Lake Stable, where he oversaw bloodstock strategy, acquisitions, and stable ops. In 2023, he founded Seth Morris Thoroughbreds, where he focuses on thoroughbred consulting, acquisitions, and sales, pinhooking partnerships, and is even developing his own racing stable, which now includes Commonwealth runner The Town, Grade 3 winner Italian Soiree, they just received $1 million offer for, Snappy Comeback, recent Grade 2 placed Fast Market, Uncle Aldo, a colt who's actually just been entered into a $150,000 stake this weekend, and plenty of other up-and-coming runners. He's a professional handicapper. Seth finished second in the 2024 National Handicapping Championship, and you'll often find him at the track or at handicapping tournaments, usually in a Grateful Dead tee. It's safe to say that Seth is a huge music fan. Maybe we can find out where that name Schoolyardsuperman came from later in the call, but super excited to welcome Seth to the chat.
Thanks for having me, Chase. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, so, all right, we're here to talk about Schoolyardsuperman, a horse that I've introduced, chatted a little bit about. Let's kind of jump right into it. Leaving the 2-year-old sale, what drove the decision to send the colt to Chad Brown?
Well, Chad had really good notes on the horse. After, we had horses with Long Lake with Chad Brown years ago. We had horses like Tommy the Torpedo, Rimska, more turf fillies. And when I spoke to Chad about expanding and kind of getting back into his barn with one of my largest clients, or actually my sole and very large client, hit the bid / savvy, he was excited and said, look, what I'm really looking for is some two-turn dirt horses. So what do you have? And I showed him a couple of horses. Like I went through the list of horses that we had, one of which was Schoolyardsuperman, and I thought that he fit the bill in several ways. I mean, first of all, he was by Practical Joke, was trained by Chad Brown. He's out of a Tiznow mare. And, I just really thought he turns all day when I saw him. I didn't think sprinter. I thought, a heavy bone, but fast two-turn. So when I brought him up as one of the two hips, he said, "Listen, I have really good notes on." So whoever was shortlisting for him, I don't know if Chad was in the sale. Brian, I'm not sure who it was. If he had very positive notes, said I'd love to trade that. Said, so we got him into the barn, and from the beginning, remember he came in from essentially the Caliente, Paulo Marquez, and he sent him in with no shoes because he didn't know exactly how Chad would set up. So when he first came in, he didn't necessarily look quite like some of the polished ones that come in, to the chat barn and that have been there, at Saratoga since May. Chad brings a ton of the yearlies up early, but quickly Chad said, "Wow, this horse is some power." As soon as he got on the track and started doing his job, started matching him up with some of the other horses, he trained really well for him, and he was really excited in the things, and basically talked him up a little bit. Basically said, "Look, this is I think that he's got a lot of talent. He reminds me of, domestic product, which was a little bit insane to me. To me, I'm just more thinking this is a very sound looking horse that has some pedigree, has a dam side page that's been very active with some fast horses. And I thought being by Practical Joke and having his confirmation, he's a perfect fit."
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, Chad knows Practical Jokes almost better than anybody. He trained Practical Joke. He's trained some of the best Practical Jokes. High praise to have a conditioner like Chad compare the horse to one of the best Practical Jokes. And funny enough, on domestic product is out of a painter mare, and painter is out of a full sister to Tiznow. So really bred on the same cross as Schoolyardsuperman. And, when I look at it, he got to Chad, I think he got to Chad and hit the work tab like late July and never missed a beat from there, right?
Yeah. He never missed a work. He just got better at it. And he always stuck with or outworked. You want to stay together. He tries not looking to have one horse significantly outwork another, but we felt good about all of his workouts. And ultimately he was working against. I think it was a 3-year-old that had raced, and got hurt, but had some talent, and that was kind of his workmate. So we knew he held him in high regard, just the way that he kind of moved up the ranks in the morning from someone that wasn't necessarily ready for Chad Saratoga string when he first came in, to quickly, moving in the mornings at least to towards the top of the class. I'm not going to talk about everyone at that source. I certainly don't know. And then the entire roster, there were no negative thoughts for Jack. It was always very positive. Those positive perceptions, and really liked the horse training well, doing everything right. We were really excited to, get him started.
Yeah, and I think an important thing to note is that these top conditioners don't throw comments around like that, in a lighthearted way. They've had so many nice horses. It's our first horse with Chad, but just in general, Brad Cox, Bob Baffert, Todd Fletcher, they don't give high remarks unless the horse is doing something to impress them. They've just had so many nice ones, and it's horse racing can be a disappointing game, and so I think it's it's a worthwhile thing to get excited when a trainer's excited, because they don't like to show their cards too often.
Yeah, and I agree. And I mean, he really has Chad is in no need of clients. It's a privilege to be in his barn, and give him a couple of horses. So he has no reason to huff up my horses in any way. So, that was more exciting to me too. I'm like, okay, there's no reason for him to be telling me the horse is training.
Yeah, he can fill the stall.
Yeah, he's a nice horse.
So let's talk. I think the biggest question on people's mind naturally is this first trip. He came out he went for his maiden debut. I think he went off the favorite. He jumped from the gates beautifully, got put in a sticky situation, and he had a fall. Amazingly, finished the race on his own power. I think you've really earned that name, Schoolyardsuperman. Um, Talk to us a little bit about that race and, kind of coming out of it. I think a lot of people are concerned. Was he hurt?
Well, ironically enough, I watched the race right here from this room at Keeneland. I'm at Keeneland right now at the November breeding stock sale. So I watched it on that TV right there. And, we went off favored and we had super high expectations. And I would dispute that he really jumped away well in the first start. He really got hit hard. He bumped with Gordy and one other horse at the start and he got squeezed and then kind of rushed up into, so we thought he would be like on the lead. He's always popped out the gate well and shows natural, speed. So we thought he'd be a little bit closer. Things happened first start. Obviously, he then got into the situation where he tried to come up the inside. The other horse did respond well. The McGahee horse that ended up running third in the Remsen, responded well. And, so I don't know, I'm not a rider and, unfortunately clipped heels and, the horse went down. And once they showed the incident over and over here in the room, I knew the horse was okay or up at least because usually they don't show it. They don't show anything that happens. So I had no idea, no information, had no one on the phone. So he got up, he had scrapes and bruises, and it looked day one like amazingly nothing was really wrong with him. We needed to give it a little bit of time. We had the vets look at him, obviously. He was on the vets list. He came back and he worked really well the first time he worked for the vets, and there was absolutely no issue. He worked again, and then, I think we worked one or two more times, and then, I think we were initially the second start thinking about stretching him out to a mile, and Chad just said, after the first start, he didn't want to stress him that much. He thought a sprint race would actually put less stress on him. And then I guess we can get to the second race, but in terms of physicality and how he came out, amazingly enough, he came out virtually unscathed. We wouldn't have run him back, and we wouldn't have, Chad's, if you watch Chad Brown, he doesn't run horses every 3 weeks, right? He runs his good horses. He really spaces them out. So I think, he had we still have very high hopes for those. We had high hopes of potentially getting his maiden broken and running in a race like the Remsen and, get a immediately black type. So that's kind of on hold for now. But in terms of, I would also never discuss with you the potential to syndicate a piece of horse to a large group that had any type of physical issues, right? It's the same way that I was very particular in who I brought into the Chad Brown barn. I think I've been very particular in the way I've spoken to you about not giving you a horse with rib issues. How mentally affected by it, I can't say. I think we expected to win the maiden race, second race, and he didn't. So to be fair, I don't know. But he ran well enough. He ran a 71 buyer. So, without the early commentary, I would be absolutely ecstatic about everything. For a horse to fall like that, come back well, run a 71 buyer, pop out of the gate, show fight to get second. We don't think he's a sprinter. So, while it wasn't a domestic product like performance, to be fair, there aren't many domestic products, right? And that's going to be him as he matures and gets older. So I'm very happy with his first race and where he is out of the race.
Well, and I would also add, number one, with the way that HISA is and the way that these the way that the veterinary environment is, a horse would never be approved to run if he wasn't fully, evaluated and known to be sound, number one. Number two, he came back like a normal horse out of a normal race. He worked about 2.5 weeks later, put in a nice work. So, if something was wrong, it would have shown up between now and that next race. The final thing I'll say about the soundness piece is, in the same way that you wouldn't offer an unsound horse, Commonwealth, for everyone's benefit, for the issuer's benefit, for our customers' benefit, always does an independent veterinary examination to make sure the horse is racing sound and everything is good. what I would personally comment on in terms of the race, you know, number one, Maggie Wolpendale, I think, said it best. If that happens to a filly, I think you have also more to be concerned about. Colts tend to bounce back from that just fine, and I think he showed that in the first race. I mean, first of all, he took a much wider trip than the winner. Like you said, he fought for second. And a 71-72 buyer for a proper debut, especially when you've got Chad Brown doesn't crank his horses. That's not his style. This isn't a sprinter. That's what gave me a lot of hope for, again, Chad's comments, the pedigree, what we've discussed about the horse. And so I think all in all, I think there's a lot to look forward to. And again, I think Chad's horses, what we've seen with Sierra Leone, what we've seen with these other horses, they get better as time goes on. He's not a come out and crank type trainer.
Yeah, and I didn't look at this horse and say, "Oh my God, this is a super girly 2-year-old." That's going to be running a Keeneland, 4.5 furlongs down spring, and that then we're going to put away. This was always a horse that I said this is a horse that we want on the classic trails. And once again, why would I want to give? Not that I wouldn't want to give Chad a good sprinter, but he specifically said 2 turns dirt. So that's how I evaluated the physical and the pedigree, and just the mentality of the horse.
Yeah, and somebody actually asked that question. Let's jump into that real quick. Somebody said, looking at his pedigree, they thought it leaned towards sprinting, I think, because of Practical Joke. Why do you think he could have an impact on any sort of Triple Crown trail? This isn't us guaranteeing that he's there, but go ahead and give your opinion because I have one.
Well, I mean, I think people said that about Into Mischief too. Oh, he's not great at 1.25 miles. It's more 1.16 miles, 1/8 for a while. Right? So, to me, even when you're betting races, and sometimes you want to figure out who's going to be in the lead with an 1/8 mile to go, right? And not rely on like someone to fall apart or someone to make a huge closing move. And, most of the time, the horse that's in the lead with the or at 16th, wins the race. So, I would say that just the influence of Tiznow and the physical of the horse, the way that he showed at the Woods Edge consignment as a yearling, the way that he ran down in Ocala, even the way he galloped out, he has a very even way of going. And I think that it's not an explosive type sprint or turf move. It's a grinding, natural speed. Can we carry that speed with this physical and get stronger and stronger and stronger and then let it play out? I don't want this horse to be a Sierra Leone, 20 lengths off the lead. I think that full speed and fight and hopefully at 2 turns versus sprinting where another horse, maybe he gets a little braver on the lead. Maybe they'll just figure him out. Maybe he's just, this was his first race, right? To figure out really what the hell he's doing. And he did second. Like I said, I think he's the kind of horse that should be progressive. Chad's the kind of trainer that understands what he has physically and what the limit of a horse is and how to take it slow. I mean, he's not spared to take it slow, right? And not so, the fact that the horse is in training and right out of this race, and I'm not sure exactly when he's going to run, but I think everything, all systems you go to remain in training and point to the kind of campaign that we expected, which is trying to get him stretched out, trying to get him to the impactful races in the winter and early spring and really see if we have, if he has that Triple Crown quality.
Yeah. Well, and I would agree. The comment that I would add, it's very easy to focus on the sire and what the sire has done, but people need to remember, number one, as you said, Into Mischief, nobody thought about him going sending horses 1.25 miles. He's now done it multiple times. The other thing I would add is Distorted Humor on the bottom side of Practical Joke's pedigree, produced a Kentucky Derby winner in Funny Side. And then you go actually to the bottom side of the pedigree, as you mentioned, Tiznow, the only horse in history to win the Breeders' Cup Classic twice. And then you go on the bottom side of the mother's pedigree, on Tiz Legal, and that's Maria's Mon, which is, by the way, where this horse gets his gray from. Fun fact for all of you listening, every gray horse must inherit it from a gray mother or father. That's the only way it can come. So you can trace gray all the way back to the beginning of the pedigree through one ancestor. Maria's Mon, a gray horse, produced 2 Kentucky Derby winners. They could go 1.25 miles. So there's tons of 1.25 miles pedigree. But I agree with you. I don't think that's a problem at all.
And listen, once again, if he's a top class miler, that works too, right? This isn't like, oh my God, wait till he goes 1.5 miles. We don't really know until they do it, but he has the kind of stride that seems repeatable and the kind of body that could handle the type of training that would be required to be fit enough to be, carrying his speed 1.25 miles.
Well, let's talk to that. I like that comment as a natural transition point. Um, that's the other thing I really liked about the Colt, and I actually like about Practical Joke. Solid bone, sturdy looking horses. You've got a history of horses with long careers. Um, why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's very simple. While I was not doing this professionally, I was given the opportunity by Stephen Mack at Long Lake Stables to really learn the bloodstock side. I met him through gambling in Wall Street, and he, after some successes on the gambling side, he said, "Look, I really want you to learn." So for a couple of years, I walked around with Nick Shalusto, Hansley Albina. Walked around with Jeannie Mayberry. So I walked around with some seasoned bloodstock professionals and learned and allowed them to teach me for the first couple of years. And then I said, you know what, I'm ready to do this. And I would buy one horse a year. And so buying one horse a year, I had to be extremely, extremely selective and make sure that that was made the races, right? And so what I did was really go to multiple sales and buy one horse. And people would be like, who is this guy putting the cards in, and coming to March and April and looking at workouts and like going and buying one horse. And, but I was, luckily able to find some really sad ones. One of which was a horse named Monty Man. That's two-time Louisiana Horse of the Year. Not for us, but ultimately in his career, he made his way down to Louisiana. Beat 800,000 and won 18 times. We had Stan the Man that did race for Long Lake for his entire career. That that had multiple stakes wins. And so Gray Walz. I just think that because I only had one horse a year, I was extremely selective, and I still am. So through last year, any horse I bought made the races. I had never bought a horse. And a couple of cheaper ones too. I mean, even I had a friend that asked for, I bought him a $15,000 Indiana bred. Is he great? No, but he's at Parks now, and he's a 3-year-old, and he's won 15 times with 3 wins and 4 seconds. And he's bouncing around for 7,500, but he's made 65,000. So he's made 4 times what they paid, and I got him a fun horse to make the races.
Right.
So that's the way I think about it. And as I've gotten more money to put into it, I did pinhooking along with Thoroughstock one year, and then we had some decent success and some failures. And just looking at the internal work, I was given a chance by my main investor to do it myself the second year. And so we came up with one that we flipped for a lot of money. He paid 175,000 for a nice constitution and sold it for 975. And a bunch of the other ones, they worked really well at OBS, and we didn't sell them, but we were super excited to keep them as racehorses because, once again, I'm not trying to necessarily sell a flashy product. I've never pinhooked. I've never had a consigner. I just bought sound racehorses. And so for whatever reason, one of them was incredibly well received and some others weren't. But out of the ones that weren't, you mentioned Snappy Comeback. We didn't get what we wanted, but she's already made far more than we wanted, on the racetrack. And we're excited to have a stake filly for next year.
Well, and to that point, no, I mean, and I applaud you for that. And the other thing that I think it's easy to forget, if you see RNA on a horse at a sale, it's very important to remember, a Breeders' Cup winner this year was a $300,000 RNA. She went 9-3 at OBS. She was gorgeous. By Matoli, showed incredible speed. 9-3, by the way, is like only a couple horses have ever done that. And she won the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, and she just sold for 5.2 million. And look, so I think it's very easy to see that and go, well, something was wrong. It's not. There are flavors of the month. There are, people don't believe in something. And by the way, super smart people in this industry are wrong all the time. And, what I like more than anything is for a trainer like Chad Brown to go, hey, I want this horse. That's and to still like the horse. And by the way, come out of a great race, come out of a race in such a positive way and be ready to train forward. So last question for you. Schoolyard Superman, tell us, where the heck did that name come from?
It really came. I'm a huge music and Grateful Dead fan, especially, and to I would be lying if I said I named the horse. This one, this came from Hal Mintz, who is the managing partner of Hit the Bid, and he's a huge Steely Dan fan. And he said, "This is Schoolyard Superman." I said, "Okay." And he said some names that I thought were awesome. I really like this one, and he said some that I don't love. But once again, I've got a whole list of the Grateful Dead names for when I get that whole thing going, which is one of the things I'm working on. And I've got like only one right now that's running. But yeah, I love music. I think one of the things I'd love to do ultimately is like bring music and racing together, and especially for aftercare. I'm just envisioning like a huge concert up in Saratoga, or a concert weekend in Saratoga every year that's known as like that's aftercare weekend, and people just come all over the place, and it's like benefits the whole industry. It's an awesome weekend, and like, hey, like I'll be there for the music. So like, one can dream.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, and speaking of that, it's important to say, every single Commonwealth offering dedicates money to aftercare. And in purchasing shares of this horse, doing the successful offering, we'll be donating $6,000 to aftercare to make sure that horses have a safe landing spot. And
That's great.
Commonwealth's been really lucky, that so many of our horses have gone to the breeding shed that I like to say we're in the black on our aftercare donations because we haven't been a tax on the system. But we think it's super important, and glad to kind of share that value with you.
Cool.
That sounds great, man. Seth, we know you're busy. Thanks so much for jumping on, and thanks for bringing another nice colt to Commonwealth.
All right. Well, thank you, Chase. Thanks for talking, and look forward to seeing this colt running.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, we'll see you at the races. All right. Well, now that we've sent Seth on his way, he's got more horses to look at and plenty of work to do. Just wanted to make sure I go through some of the other questions that were submitted and make sure that um, we have checked all the boxes, kind of dotted our I's and crossed our T's. One person asked that we didn't get to, but why after a few races is this colt being offered for partnership? Has he not met your original expectations? I think one of the most important things to understand about the horse racing industry is that, and we have a lot of experience with this, there is, never a bad time to bring on a partner and take a little money off the table, regardless of your belief. I remember right before the Belmont, we sold a portion of We the People to celebrity chef Bobby Flay. And you got to think about it. This was a horse owned by people with billions of dollars in net worth, and tons of money coming in through, stud fees and sales and other race earnings. And so, I think it's, I understand why people would be curious about that. But the thing to remember is that, smart business people, when you have a chance to take a little bit of money off the table, by the way, the owner of this colt was not willing to sell more than 25%. He believes in this colt deeply, but it's a great time to bring on a partner. He actually wants to help bring more people to racing. And in taking a little bit of money off the table, it allows him to continue to buy and find nice horses. It's a portfolio strategy. And so I would caution you of ever thinking that, offering a horse up for sale is indicative of the belief in the horse. People have done this for ages, and it's not uncommon to continue offering pieces of horses throughout the year. I remember, selling a portion of Country Grammar just before the Saudi Cup. You ask why? We brought on a great owner. It got us, brought some money on the table. You never know what can happen with these horses. It's a risky business. And so, it really is a smart move. And we're grateful that people do it because this is the hardest time of year to purchase 2-year-old colts. because of the races they're going to be pointed to, most people want to hold on as tight as they can. And, you know, thankfully we have a partner that we have a trusting business relationship with, and gives us the opportunity to buy into these nice colts with top trainers. Just going to look if there's any other questions. I think we've very clearly answered that, you know, veterinarians have not found any lingering effects from the first race. Very happy with where the colt is headed. He's already back in training, training forwardly after that last race. And again, if there was an issue, that type of issue would have been sussed out in the bone scans that were done and the PET scans and things that are required after an incident like that. This is a tough, well-built colt. I think we have answered all the questions. So with that, we're going to start offering this colt very quickly. If by the time this video comes out, we may have already started offering him. Very excited to welcome you guys to Schoolyard Superman. We're hopeful that this is going to be a really fun journey. Great to be in Chad Brown's barn. And we hope this was a helpful session. If you have further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. hello@joincommonwealth.com. Our team will work as hard as we can to get those question answers. So head to the app, explore the offering, keep your eyes peeled on your inbox. Otherwise, you have the opportunity to pick up some shares and join the ride. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.